one of the questions that more you think about it, the deeper it seems to pull you in, right? The phrase itself was popularized by philosopher David Chalmers in 1919, and it's essentially asking this, how can something as immaterial as subjective experience, right? What philosopher called as qualia. So, how can something as immaterial as subjective experience, right? This is a profound question, right? Why is there something it feels like to be you? Because we can explain a lot of brain work in terms of neurons, network, function, but we still haven't come close to explain why it feel like anything at all. So let me frame it with an example. If you think about a robot that built to mimic human behavior, this robot can identify a red apple, uh, say that's red, right? And even associate red with stop sign or danger, just like we do. But does this robot actually experience the color red? Does it know what redness feel like, right? Or is it just running a series of calculation and algorithm to simulate that understanding? Now, if you replace the robot with a human being, right, we know that when we see a red neuron in the brain or visual cortex in response to, wavelength of the light, but I think the question should be, why does the firing lead to the sensation of redness, right? What does the physical process give rise to a subjective feeling, right? Uh, so why is there any subjective feeling to all? I think the hardest problem gonna be bridging the gap. So the science we have right now is very good at explaining what Kalma called easy problem of consciousness. Though easy is relative, you know, uh, term here, there are things like how the brain processes information, how it make a better decision, how it integrate sensory input, how it gonna create memory. So neuroscience can map our brain, right? Region responsible for vision, language, or emotion, and show how this part interact, right? But all of this is still on the level of function. So it's about describing what the brain does, right? The objective process. The hardest problem gonna be is about why it feel like something to do the thing, right? So let me put in this way. So there are few people have tried to think about this. Let's start with the materialistic purpose. I mean, uh, perspective, which is probably the dominant one in modern science. So many materials say that consciousness is entirely a product of physical process in the brain. So essentially, the mind is what the brain does. Uh, from this perspective, the hardest problem isn't really a separate problem at all. It's just a particular thorny question within neuroscience, right? So this hope is that as we learn more about the brain, we will eventually be able to explain how subject experience gonna emerge, right? This integrated information theory, like for instance, that say that consciousness arises from, let's say this is a system. Uh, I mean, it emerged from that system that integrate information in a complex way. So the more integrated and complex the system, the richer the experience in consciousness, right? So it's an interesting idea and some has some empirical support, but many people say it's more of a description than an explanation. It doesn't tell why information integration should feel anything. So then there's panpsychism view, right, which take radically different approach. So panpsychists say that consciousness is in something that emerge at certain level of complexity, right? Like in human or animal instead. So it's a fundamental property of the universe, like let's say mass or charge. In this view, everything has some level of consciousness. Uh, Even atom, particle. Though this consciousness would be unimaginably simple. So when this particle come together in a complex system, like let's say brain, their consciousness combine into something richer and more complex, right? It's a wild idea, but it has an advantage of sidestepping the emergence problem here, because if consciousness is fundamental, you don't have to explain how it arises from anything else. So there's another perspective called dualism. It says that I think consciousness and physical world are two separate kind of stuff. So this way has a longer story, right? Going back to philosopher like Descartes, he said something fabulous. He said something like, I think, therefore I am. According to dualism, right, consciousness isn't reducible to a physical process. So it's something distinct. But dualism comes with its own challenge, right? Especially when it comes to explaining how the mind and body interact. If the mind is, let's say, non-physical, how it gonna influence the physical brain and vice versa? So one more uh, contender that gained a lot of attention when I read a lot of paper is quantum mechanics, right? There is a lot of research, Roger Penrose and Stuart Hambrough. He said something fabulous. Quantum process in the brain might be a better way to understand consciousness. There's a theory called OR, which is orchestrated objective reduction. It says that consciousness arises from a quantum computation in microtubule, tiny structure within the brain cell. It's a fascinating idea to me, but it's it's also highly speculative, right? It's not widely acceptable in the world, uh, but it's point to be. The possibility that we might have a fundamental new framework, something as revolutionary as quantum mechanics itself, to solve a new harder problem. So, and there is the possibility that we might never solve it. So some philosophers say that harder problem is inherently unsolvable, either because our brain are inadequate to understand it, because it's simply not the kind of problem that has an answer. So just think about Gödel's incompleteness, right? There's a theorem in maths which shows that certain truth cannot be proven within a given system. Maybe consciousness is more like that, something we can experience but never fully explain. So some people say the harder problem might dissolve if we change the way we think about it. So maybe it's isn't a thing to be explained but a process to be understood in a context, right? So the harder problem might be less about a finding a single answer, more about exploring, right, this concept, the mystery, about uh, consciousness. Uh, but when I listen to many of the philosopher, they had a perspective that this is more like a subjective experience for them. And I listen to almost most of the podcasts, and even if we never solve the harder problem, journey of understanding, trying to understand is a better way to say, be one of the most meaningful pursuit we could undertake in the future. So, if you know about consciousness or any kind of knowledge or about this answer, you could comment down